All right, everyone, as we head into week 2 of the impeachment fiasco, we might as well reflect upon week 1, where we got several witnesses, none of whom have actually met the President of the United States, none of which, I guess, listened in directly to much of the central complaint with regards to the Ukraine quid pro quo that has now turned from quid pro quo, which they can't show. If their star witness and the other auxiliary witnesses from the first week don't show anything like that, it's basically bullshit. We've then moved on from that to intimidation, which, it can't be proven. It's also bullshit. Based on a tweet, you give a tweet about another person and it's an attempt to intimidate them materially. Not really. And then bribery. The closest thing that you can show is bribery, based on the testimony and the transcripts that you've got so far. The problem is that it would be attempted bribery, number one, because the aid to Ukraine that's at the center of this was eventually dispensed. Number two, the problem is that the Ukrainian government has already stated that they didn't have a problem with the context of the calls, didn't feel that it was an attempted bribery. That undercuts, because he was actually there, the president of Ukraine, and he's saying it's not bribery, he didn't see a problem, it wasn't difficult in any way for him, it's fine. That undercuts all witness testimony. At the end of the day, what I expect is this impeachment proceeding will drag on for a very long time. What the Democrats are hoping, I think, is to hold Trump's toes to the fire at this point. They're trying to pull a Mueller. Mueller realized after starting the probe that it was based on nonsense and that the central premise, which was Russian election interference, did not happen. He therefore decided to cast the net as widely as possible and bide his time as long as possible in hopes of catching other people. Most of those that the Mueller probe ever caused to be charged with a crime, whether they were prosecuted successfully or not, were for little things: lying to the FBI, tampering with witnesses, lying before Congress, things of that nature. Small, petty things. Papadopoulos spending 2 weeks in jail. Roger Stone's crimes, none of them relate to anything material involving Russia. It involves lying, essentially. He'll spend, I guess, the rest of his life in prison now for that, which makes absolutely no sense. It's an attempt to punish him for political reasons. He should be pardoned. I do support pardoning Roger Stone. By the way, I think the nation would have no problem with that. Trump could just commute it to time served or something. Let him stay in there for a month. And then before he gets Epstein, go ahead and let him out, essentially. Say, well, the Papadopoulos served 2 weeks for similar charges, so fuck off. By the way, I'm going to be using profanity more often in my videos these days because of the COPPA bullshit. This is now explicitly a 21 and up channel, so, everyone else, I guess you'd better go, because if the demographics are too young, the federal government will want to fine me or something. I don't know exactly how that works. I think it's dumber than a box of rocks, and blatantly unconstitutional, will probably never lead to successful prosecution of anyone that has any means to fight it, which is the point. It's not going to be used for larger creators. It's going to be used for the little people. They're not going to go after the young Turks. Let's just put it that way. Here's the thing. I don't think the metrics have moved after a week. It'll be interesting to see in the next round of polling if anything has changed with regards to approval of the Dems, of Trump, Pelosi in specific, and shift the inquiry itself. At first, it was more than 50% of the population wanted at least an impeachment inquiry. Now, of course, pollsters at the time hid the fact that they were talking about inquiry rather than actual impeachment. If you ask people if Trump should be removed from office, it was never 50% support. That has fallen. Support for the inquiry is now in the 40s. It'll probably continue to fall as it drags on, but what the Democrats are betting on is that somebody else will come forward, Mueller style, to bail them out. What they're hoping, they know that there was no Ukrainian quid pro quo that they can prove. They know that they can't actually make a bribery charge stick, and they know that regardless of whether they impeach him or not, the Senate's not going to remove him from office. What they want is to get as many juicy details from as many people as possible, while harnessing the power of the fact that they control the House to prevent the Republicans from doing too much counter damage in cross-examination in order to make it look one-sided, in order to paint a picture for the American people. Trump is guilty. He is a horrible person. He's bad and wrong and orange. That's what they want. They know that they can't actually remove him from office. They're hoping that the removal from office is essentially the next election. That's basically what they're banking on. That's going to take time. What they're going to do is they're going to cast the net wide. They're going to try to smoke out other people, and what you'll end up getting, because we don't even know who the whistleblower is, or if there indeed even is one, the problem that you could get is that anyone with a bone to pick with Trump can come forward and say, oh yeah, I heard this from this person who heard it from that person who says that they had a friend who anonymously told them that Trump said, he wanted to lean on the Ukrainians. This will be entered in as material evidence despite the fact that there is no central source to derive it from. It's hearsay. It's speculative. It would never be accepted in an actual court of law. So far, you have not one direct bit of testimony whatsoever to suggest that Trump did anything wrong. The only direct individual involved with the call, other than the whistleblower, so-called, which may or may not even exist because we're not getting an identity, even though we know who it is the Ukrainian president. The Ukrainian president has no problem with what Trump did or what he said, so there goes that. There is nothing else. It's funny to see how it's morphed because, again, we're following the same trend as the Mueller probe. The Mueller probe was sold to us initially as the President of the United States, or at least people very close to him, colluded with a foreign nation to undermine the U.S. election. There was an active attempt by the Russian government at a central level, Putin, KGB, his inner circle, to interfere in the U.S. election to get Trump elected. We now know that that central premise, which was based on the Steele dossier in large part, is false. It is not true in any meaningful way. The extent of Russian interference in the election was laughable. It involved non-centralized troll farms with low budgets buying Facebook ads and making shitty memes. Well within the capability of any 5 or 6 basement-dwelling neckbeard Gatorade swillers who get together to play Dungeons and Dragons on the weekend. They could have probably done better memes with no budget than all of the Russian troll farm did. It doesn't matter if you buy, by the way, Facebook ads. Facebook ads suck, and there's a reason why fewer and fewer people buy them. But that was the premise upon which it was sold. Later on, it became the Manafort probe. Oh, Manafort laundered money long ago. It became the Flynn probe. Flynn lied about his contacts with Turkey. It became the Papadopoulos probe. Oh, he lied to the FBI once. We'll give him 2 weeks in jail. It became the, hey, no, I can't prove that Trump didn't obstruct justice probe. But there was never any collusion. The entire central premise was completely removed, and so the probe completely collapsed. But if you're a never Trumper, or a Dem partisan, or something along those lines, you look at the probe and say, well, Trump's guilty anyway, because you were fed that for over a year by the legacy media. It is a form of propaganda. The lie is being repeated ad nauseum, and will continue to be repeated forever. People still refer to Russia conspiracy as though it were true and not completely undermined by their own partisan probe, which is exactly what it is. The same will happen here. By the way, regardless of whether Trump wins re-election, they can impeach him and he could still win. Quite easily, in fact, considering the current crop of Democrats suck completely. The problem is that those who have already been primed by propaganda to say orange man bad and have Trump derangement syndrome will look at this and say, well, we know Trump obstructed justice. He was doing dirty things in Ukraine. He held money over their head for illegal reasons. Even though I highly doubt in the entire course of the inquiry you will hear from even one person, one individual who had direct knowledge of the content of the call in the first place. I doubt you'll hear anything from them. By the way, now you've got the transcripts out there. That's great, because now some other person can literally just read them over, develop their own story, come in and talk to Schiff, say, hey, I've got additional information, say whatever they want. They're shielded under whistleblowing laws. Potentially, at least in theory. They can literally say whatever they want without fear of repercussions. The Republicans are barely going to even get a chance to cross-examine. They have to okay the witnesses that they want to have that could act as exculpatory evidence for Trump. They have to clear that with Adam Schiff, of all people. You think he's going to let anyone juicy in there to explain, yeah, by the way, I heard a different story. I heard that Trump was buddy-buddy with the Ukrainian president. This had nothing to do with Biden at the time, and there was no problem. The idea, by the way, let's even accept part of the central premise. Let's accept the central premise that Donald Trump did lean on the Ukrainians to open this investigation up again. That's funny because it was initially an Obama-era thing. So, in other words, he was just taking the national security concerns of the prior administration saying, well, it looks like there was no closure here and there's a problem still. The fact that it involved Hunter Biden shouldn't even matter. This is not the VP. This is not candidate Biden. This is Biden's son. The idea that a person, by running for office, or by being associated with somebody who is in or running for office, should be shielded from repercussions is crazy. The Democrats have spent the last 2 years whining about the Trump children supposedly grifting off of their father and wanting to perform all sorts of investigations into his holdings and their holdings and everything along those lines. How is that any different? How is that not a direct, explicit political attempt to punish their political opponent? In Trump's case, some of the witness testimony we've gotten, even from witnesses called forth by the Democrats, has been damning to their bottom line. And so what I'm not understanding is how any individual with any sense of reason or sanity, certainly that understands the concept of, hey, you should assume that crimes didn't happen unless you have substantial evidence otherwise, can take second or third hand information from partisan sources that's been called forth by one party for obvious political reasons, take it at a token that it's real, assume that, and suggest, yes, by the way, this is a proper standing to remove the President of the United States causing political chaos in the country. At some point, there's also the pragmatic argument. What would the benefit be to the country? Our economy's going fine. Our diplomacy's going fine. Supposedly, Trump's fucking up constantly on diplomacy, not in any major wars. I don't see our allies are not actually abandoning us. That was a talking point briefly a long time ago. No depression or stock market crash. Terrorists aren't coming in blowing us up every day. Where's the chaos? The only chaos is being manufactured by the corporate media with the cause of, hey, orange man bad. Everything else is fine. We're not in crime waves. There's no cholera epidemic. I don't see any problem with things. The problems are being conducted by the big tech and democratic obstruction and foreign nations other than Russia occasionally nitpicking about censorship are way bigger problems. Chinese hacking is a way bigger problem than Russian election interference. You should be worried about the voting machines, not about foreign states. Possibly dead people voting, I suppose, in small numbers. That could tip a close election. Certainly more than a Russian troll farm making a Facebook ad. As for Ukraine, the idea that the president firing ambassadors, which is his right, withholding aid, which he apparently could do unilaterally, I don't understand how this is problematic unless you assume the political motive. There's more news today. They've got some other witness they're going to be calling for. Says, oh, I felt this call was totally inappropriate, and I felt that it was politically motivated more than other calls to world leaders. That's your opinion. You felt that it was motivated that way. Your opinion is that it was politically motivated. That doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with the law. It has nothing to do with reality. That's how you felt. What if the Republicans were able to bring forth an appropriate number of witnesses? I'm sure they could find a dozen people to say, no, I thought it was fine. What if they say, hey, we want to have the Ukrainian president show up and give testimony? The Republicans should consider the possibility. I'm not sure if that's legally or diplomatically possible, but they could at least try it. That would be interesting. No, there was no quid pro quo. No, he withheld the aid for a while because we needed to tackle corruption. We did. Who cares? We didn't care if it was Hunter Biden. The investigation was into Burisma. He just happened to be along for the ride. That's not political hand-wringing. That's just the way things work. That's about all. Peace out.